Stranger Things has finally ended with 5 seasons after about a decade. Despite being probably the most American-watched streaming show ever by minutes watched, it's been more bad than good. It seems like a lot of people didn't realize this until the last season, but the show really lost its way after season 1. It's a generally fun and digestible show. It's just not a very good one. I want to talk about the positives and negatives for each season, but generally speaking, we ended with 1 great season of television, 2 middling ones, and 2 really bad ones. Each season definitely had aspects I enjoyed, but the show really got by on the goodwill of the fans from season 1, 80s nostalgia, great chemistry from our main cast, and some really good performances for Joyce, Hopper, Steve, and Vecna as far as the adults go. And there were also a lot of good concepts that never really fulfilled their potential. Over the course of the seasons, the main crew that drew everyone in was slowly pushed to the side and really had nothing of note to do as the show progressed. The world building suffered as the show continuously, carelessly, and incoherently tried to raise the stakes with no regard for the previous or future seasons. All of the antagonists are both stupid and completely ineffectual on the human side of the story, and this really escalates after season 2. The formula for the show also became pretty transparent. You bring in a new nice person character, kill them off at the end of the season to make the audience sad, but don't touch the main cast no matter what. And this creates a continually escalating plot armor for the main crew, making the show feel so stakeless. I'm assuming the writers are vegans. And of course, anyone who's remotely part of the jock clique will get treated terribly. All in all, we end up with a show where no 2 seasons are coherent with one another. The characters become consumed with personal drama while world-ending stakes are taking place all around them. We get sidelined with plots that tend to be completely unnecessary for the main plot or are just outright idiotic. We end with either no answers or nonsensical ones to questions that didn't really need an answer to begin with beyond it's vaguely sci-fi. The power levels are completely inconsistent. They're really just whatever the scene needs them to be, also undermining any real tension or stakes. The Demogorgons can eat machine gun fire from the military, but also get hit in the face with a wine bottle or poked with a spear in a prison. Vecna is powerful enough to move worlds through dimensions, but doesn't beat 11 a single time in this show, outside of when he gets rid of her by tricking Hopper. Personally, I would recommend people watch season 1 and then just stop. Maybe season 2. But season 1 was clearly the only season that had really intentional and tight writing from the beginning. And that one, the Duffer Brothers very clearly had a specific plan and idea for every character involved. As the show goes on, they were either inept or incapable of planning and carrying out a story that respected the seasons before it. I'm going to go season by season now, but I'll just go ahead and say my order from best to worst would be 1, 2, 4, 3, 5. 1 was very clearly written with purpose, super efficient with time. Every character involved had a meaningful story. 2 was similar to 1, but slower and worse. It kind of just meanders. 4 has very good elements, but also really bad parts of the show that just take up way too much time. 3 is laughable. I imagine most people wouldn't even bother defending it. And 5 is both a waste of time and also incredibly destructive to all the prior seasons. All right, so let's just get into season 1. Obviously, this one's my favorite. I think I've said it like 4 times already. If the show had ended here, you'd have a sort of bittersweet coming-of-age story where the boys the games play become a parallel to real life, and they get to become heroes and see an actual superhero while also experiencing a pretty significant loss. It's a relatively happy ending overall, where they do end up finding Will against all odds, but losing 11. This is especially tragic for Mike as his kind of first love. And you obviously get the parallels of them facing the Demogorgon in D&D and then facing it in real life and standing up to their bullies throughout the year and also standing up to the government and the Demogorgon. And this is all driven by a relentless loyalty to their friend. Really a kind of classic 80s boyhood story. On top of this, you get Joyce, who people think is crazy, but she believes in her son when no one else will, including her other son. The fact that people already thought she was mentally unstable feeds into this, especially when she starts talking about the walls moving. She also struggles with guilt over the type of parent she was prior to Will being kidnapped and blames herself for the kidnapping in general. And you have a single mother of 2 boys who's willing to do anything she can to get her son back. You get a really compelling performance from Winona Ryder, and it's just really simple but effective storytelling and a really easy character to root for. This story runs in tandem or adjacent pretty much the whole season with the redemption arc for Hopper, whose backstory that he lost a child previously and obviously very tragically to cancer turned him into a depressed, drunk, kind of drug addict, slacker, cop type. But for this season, he steps up and really does everything within his power to help Joyce find her own son again and to help unfold a government conspiracy when he got him in just drifting through life. Just another character who's vital to the plot, super easy to root for. You always love a redemption story, especially when the thing that they're being redeemed for really isn't even their fault. It's just a terrible thing that happened to them that kind of led their life to spiral out of control. For the supporting cast, you have the side story of Nancy, Steve, and Jonathon. You have Nancy, the nerd girl who's overzealous to be dating the popular guy who's a womanizer but actually falling for a girl the first time. Of course, you have the jock loses his girlfriend to the nerd kind of trope for reasons that he doesn't understand. The aspect of Jonathon being the guy who's viewed as a weirdo and then gets caught taking pictures of Nancy in her underwear through the window and then coming out as the good guy is probably the worst element of the first season. However, her and Jonathon working together and that leading to a sort of trauma bonding relationship because of Barb going missing and Will missing is a pretty solid foundation. The comeuppance for the popular guy who's kind of a jerk is a pretty classic 80s trope, but the mechanism to make it happen is pretty unjust and weak. A guy taking pictures of your spouse changing and only getting a broken camera, I think is pretty fair, maybe even benevolent. This all does lead to a nice little mini arc for Steve, where even after he had gotten beaten up by Jonathon and he sees a giant alien monster attacking Nancy and steps in to fight with a baseball bat when he easily could have just left. The backstory of 11 and the government program is handled in a pretty time-efficient manner as well, with a pretty nice arc and payoff in the finale. Seeing 11's mother be part of the conspiracy, Papa getting eaten by the Demogorgon, even though he gets retconned later, having 11 be exposed to a kind of life of what could have been, and then using her powers that were forced on her to save the day is a really good payoff. The whole aspect of her abusive and tragic backstory, with her getting to become a normal girl, see what life could have been, and still making the decision to sacrifice herself, is a pretty classic hero story, but really well executed and pretty well rounded for the time they have. The world building is done in a way that you can understand the rules that we're working with generally. It's mysterious enough to be terrifying and also allow the scenes with the monsters and the unknown to ratchet up tension. When you see the government go in and not make it very far before they get eaten, or when you see Barbara sitting by the pool just vanish, or the wall coming in through Joyce's house, all of this works to set an understanding of this kind of interdimensional threat that we're dealing with, while still allowing it to be the unknown. A good example of this is when Nancy goes into the portal through the tree and she gets stuck there. It's a very oh shit moment because we've seen how quickly armed soldiers die in the Upside Down. Of course, by season 5, they're setting up a McDonald's and Nancy's Rambo, but none of that matters here. The way they figure things out through the season with the lights and trying to draw it in with blood are all pretty good plans for the amount of knowledge that they have. Obviously, they're limited, and they didn't know Vecna was lurking in the abyss the whole time. The Demogorgon is used pretty sparingly, but it's scary every time that it shows up because you see how much destruction is done to the guys in hazmat suits who have guns. We see the range of 11's power level when she's flipping vans that are pursuing them and her nose bleeds. It's pretty clear that there's a limit there. We see the amount of work, but the pretty clear trail that Hopper follows to figure out what the government's doing. Again, it's logical, even though he's kind of grasping at straws. You can see how the main boys figure things out with the radio, how the compass bugs out around the facility. We see that the government is actually competent enough to chase 11 down. Everyone in the story is pretty competent overall, and at least makes reasonable decisions based on what they know. They fit so much into 8 episodes, especially when you compare to seasons 4 and 5, which have more episodes and longer episodes. If you go back and rewatch season 1, it's really noticeable. In about 15 minutes, you get the setup of the government doing something nefarious and mysterious. You get that Hopper is a depressed, kind of slacker cop in a small town, very unserious job. You obviously get the relationship and dynamic of our main group of boys. You get Will's disappearance, even though you don't know what caused it yet. You get insight immediately into Joyce trying to get by with Jonathon and Will on her own. You get Nancy's relationship with Barb and Steve. And in the first episode overall, you get the first clues about what's going on with the government. You see whatever is happening with 11 is obviously weird. You see that the government is shady enough with whatever they're doing to kill a cafe owner just for seeing 11's face. allusions to Joyce's mental instability, the bitter relationship with their father. 11 gets introduced to the main crew, some insight into the parents' dynamics with their kids, the parents' dynamics with each other since their friends are kids. This is all fit into like a 45-minute episode. And if you compare that to the later seasons and how they use time, it's night and day. And all of this work they put in allows for the finale of the season to be really impactful. And especially because of how they handle the finale itself, the show really should have stopped here. You get the comeuppance for Papa and all the military men, 11 self-sacrifice, killing the Demogorgon, which was opening the small gates and closing the main gate. Redemption for Hopper and Steve, even though Steve didn't need it. Justification for Joyce and Jonathon, seeming crazy because they actually do find Will. Every single character is necessary for the season to function. The parents are all very appropriately worried about their kids. They communicate with each other. It's just a really tightly written season of television. Obviously, you get the little stinger at the end with Will in the bathroom, but you absolutely could have just stopped there, and there's no need to go further. Let's move on to season 2, and this is really the beginning of where the show loses its way. This season is where we start getting more characters involved and added to the party, more filler, and it sort of has a problem of being both meandering and directionless. This season starts the formula of adding a character just to get rid of them at the end of the season, and this happens in seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's also where they start adding a character for a specific purpose, but because they don't want to kill anybody, they just keep them around with nothing to do. So obviously this gets worse as each season goes on. Obviously, it's not all bad. This is where we get a lot more of Steve interacting with the kids, and his dynamic with them is a lot of fun throughout the series, Dustin in particular. The plot for this one is very similar to season 1, except everyone's dealing with trauma now, and we start getting way more into the interpersonal drama aspect that doesn't really drive the plot forward the way that season 1 did. This is where the entire threat of the Upside Down gets completely destroyed. Of course, none of this is even trying to take into account bringing Vecna in season 4 and that whole thing. But one of the worst decisions of the series, if not the worst, is showing us hurting a single tentacle of the Upside Down species literally hurts all of it. You could just control the entire Upside Down with fire forever, completely negating the threat. This also doesn't get into how come when one gets shot, they don't all get damaged, or when 11 killed a Demogorgon, they all didn't die, or when Will gets his powers, how are they not all possessed if it's a hive mind. This kind of carelessness is just prominent throughout the entire rest of the series, and they don't even care enough to have a throwaway line to try to fix it. I talked about how much they fit in episode 1 of season 1. Season 2 is a great example of how they start to bloat the runtime, and it just makes them seem like they're lost on where they're trying to go. Compare how much they fit into the first episode of season 1, and this is the first 3 episodes of season 2. We see Will's traumatized and being studied. Max shows up, and Lucas has feelings for her. Nancy and Steve break up. Mike is struggling with the loss of 11. 11 is living with Hopper and feeling cooped up. Joyce is dating Bob. Nancy has guilt over what happened to Barb last season. Will gets some visions of the Mind Flayer. Hopper finds some rotting pumpkins. We see Max and Billy have a rough relationship. But this is almost half the season for what amounts to setups and filler. There aren't really a ton of payoffs for all these either. A lot of the problem is that they're kind of trying to rerun the same mystery component from last season, but now there's less mystery that they explore. And because you've now brought in more characters, more plot lines, you're really not making very much progress on any single one of them in any given episode. You end up kind of just plodding along with every character involved. The story doesn't really feel like it goes very far from point A to point B by the end. A more tightly written show probably could have accomplished what the first 3 episodes did in like 1 episode. And this applies to pretty much the whole season. Having more compact and tight writing also would have allowed for them to really flesh out and explore the concepts that they try to introduce. And instead, it just feels like we spent a lot of the season sort of padding out runtime. We also set up some things here that don't really make any sense, like them burning the Upside Down, but it isn't all responding the way that it does later, which is vital to every single plot they win. In season 4, they even make a point of them stepping over vines as to not disturb them. We also see a bunch of Mind Flayer parts in the test tubes, and they escape at the end of the season, but that's just kind of a shitty setup for season 3 anyway. No clue how they caught it, contained it. None of that gets an explanation. If the series had actually been planned out in full, this would have been a great time to start introducing some kind of powers for Will, even if they're just weak. Also would have been a great time to introduce Vecna as some kind of behind the scenes shadowy figure controlling the Demogorgons. More broadly speaking, I think it was kind of a mistake here to have the tunnels from the Upside Down be just like 10 feet under the surface so that anyone can just dig into them with a shovel. I think they really should have left it as kind of a dimension that connects to our dimension in some inexplicable way. Not really the fault of this season, but this initial decision does lay the groundwork for the entire town just splitting open and that never being addressed by the more wide world in season 4. I mean, this would be international news. There should be a million things that are taken into consideration, like the government's role, other government's roles, science's roles. And this initial decision to move in this direction with the Upside Down is really what sets this up. And this decision gets worse in season 4, which is not season 2's fault. But when you have it this close to the surface and just splitting our Earth open, anyone could just cross dimensions because why not? And we see this when the Demogorgons raid the base in season 5. In this season, if they ironed out the exact details about our connection to the Upside Down, I think it would have constrained the story a bit and limited the ways in that we can interact with it. Instead of it going from this mysterious alternate dimension to we can all just hang out down there and build houses and bases and whatever else if we feel like. The central part of this season is Will's PTSD and him becoming a spy for the Mind Flayer that leads to the attack on the hospital. Conceptually, I actually like all of this. I like Will having to deal with trauma. I like expanding on the different species in the Upside Down, but it takes way too long to get there. We don't get enough details to understand anything later. We're kind of just in a train with no rails, and this build-up takes way too long and then gets resolved fairly quickly. Much better pacing than season 5, but what isn't? Another big component of the story is the introduction of Max, and we get her personal problems with Billy and the dynamics between her and Lucas and their relationship developing. It's not really a huge issue for this season, but it does take up quite a bit of screen time and lay groundwork for problems later on in the show, which is primarily adding in characters and then just shoving the originals aside because you don't know what to do with them. We get some time with Bob, and he's just kind of the nice guy and the puzzle solver, maybe stepdad. And really, each of these characters that get introduced and killed off are just plot devices. Bob's plot device is to be the kind of smart adult who they can also kill off when they're done with him. But he's very useful with computers at the hospital. He's very useful with the videotapes. He solves Will's map. We see kind of the same thing in season 3 with Billy, where he's just there for the Mind Flayer to be his vessel, and on it goes. 11 spends half the season essentially in solitary in the cabin, and then kind of going rogue. There's decent stuff here with her seeing her mother's past. Kind of wish we had gotten more from it. And then obviously she goes off for the episode that no one ever wants to discuss or watch again before she comes back and saves the day. It takes 3/4 of the season for Will being the spy to manifest into anything. And it's fine. It's a neat trap itself. But again, it takes way longer than it should to get there and find a damn tunnel under these weirdly dead pumpkins and farms. We spend almost half the season for Nancy to break up with Steve fully, and the second half is her getting together with Jonathon. We introduce Murray, who has a pretty distinct role in this season, and then they just decide to keep around for the rest of the series. This is also where Jonathon essentially just becomes a purse for Nancy. He does essentially nothing after season 1. We get introduced to Billy, and they could make him interesting. He's got the abusive father, lost his relationship with his mom, complicated relationship with Max, but they sort of just make him a belligerent asshole and then a vessel next season. Really a waste. I thought the actor did a pretty good job with what he was given. As we go on to the end of episode 6, where we get Steve with Dustin and the entire group together for the demo dog hunt, this also doesn't have a super satisfying payoff. It's just kind of something that happens. And Steve once again steps up to take care of the kids. He marches right out into the army to defend the bus full of children, only for the show to shit all over him and have him be a guy who peaked in high school in season 3 and then get rejected by a lesbian. Episode 7, I would imagine 99% of people would agree is the biggest waste of time in the series. It was clearly the most cringe, and now it's debatable because of season 5, I guess. 11 goes off to find herself. As much as the episode is just kind of lame, I actually do think it introduces problems for later on. And what I mean by that is this is where we see Kali's illusion power. We don't really know what the limits are or the intent of it or any of the kids' powers really. It was just kind of safe to assume they all had some kind of psychic ability. But by adding this in, I think it really leans into their philosophy of just adding in whatever's cool at the time. Like if they hadn't done this and she had powers that were similar to 11's, you could probably see an alternate story where Vecna, instead of needing to be human and turned, and then also having the illusion powers and the psychic powers, he could just be an alien general or a monster general or whatever. And then you can give him a different set of powers that are more unique to the whole hive mind thing, instead of we see Kali and 11, and then Vecna is just kind of a combination of both. And if you can get into people's minds like this and really just take it over the way that they do, you have to start wondering what the limits are. Are there limits? Why is 11 so weak compared to Kali? But also she can still beat Vecna. Then we kind of finish up the season with a couple episodes that I think are a bit of a mess. The fight at the hospital, no one uses fire. You see the Demogorgons and Demodogs just overrun this entire secret facility, which reinforces all the problems we see later when they can never just kill a kid. Bob gets an unnecessarily horrible death to try to make you be sad. And again, we learn that one person possessed by the Mind Flayer being in a room with bright lights or a sauna hurts them severely, which is a serious weakness to introduce into your show that applies to every boss of every level. Mind Flayer, Vecna, Demogorgons, Demodogs, the Vines themselves, the Bats. Just a huge problem for the story. The show likes to punish Steve again by having Billy kick his ass. And of course, he's bailed out by Max. This is also kind of where you get the ongoing 11 is going to yell and close a gate so they win. You do get some nice little moments at the end of the season in particular, where Nancy's nice to Dustin. Max has clearly chosen Lucas at this point. 11 shows up for Mike. And again, it's another decent stopping point in the story. They go to the dance. You got your couples and your results of the relationships. Gates closed. You could just stop here. And I bet if you cut the fat on this season and really tightened up the script, you could get it down to like 3 or 4 episodes, which is kind of an indictment on how much was actually accomplished this season. Season 2 really suffers, I think, because all of the character work took place in season 1. So they kind of didn't know what to do with half the cast, who they had given complete arcs. You end up with a bunch of characters that feel pretty stagnant. The mystery and plot really just kind of trudge along slowly. And another issue here is that the mystique is deteriorated from season 1. You're getting kind of diminishing returns because the characters at this point have a general understanding of the Upside Down, even if they don't know all the details, obviously. Season 3 is where the show just really feels like it's lost its way and goes off the rails completely. We spend a lot of time on the teen romance drama. Erica suddenly becomes a major and very annoying character. Robin gets introduced in a pretty good support capacity, only to become just kind of an exposition quip machine later. Of course, we get a Russian secret base under a mall that children break into. The Mind Flayer turning into a giant spider out of a bunch of rats and humans. Hopper spends a lot of the season just bitching about Mike and 11 and also being wildly inappropriate. Nancy becomes even more prevalent than season 2, and this continues to where she's essentially the main character by season 5. She gets much more annoying here. We get a completely unnecessary side plot that also just kind of makes Karen a shitty person for no reason, where she's trying to be an adulterous cougar by going after Billy. The world building also just goes insane in this season. The Russians somehow build a military base under a mall connected to a top secret government facility. Our government just abandoned the town that had an interdimensional portal with monsters coming out of it and psychic children. The Mind Flayer just exists in our world, and again has the same dumbass weakness with fire and the whole hive being hurt. They don't even try to course correct. There's like dozens of small people in this town just disappearing and no one notices or cares. You have people ending up in the hospital for eating fertilizer, along with the weird rats eating fertilizer. All this just goes uninvestigated. You've got monsters just traipsing through the hospital, which presumably have cameras and also a lot of witnesses, and no one gives a shit. Hopper is the only one who cares about the Terminator wannabe Soviets on American soil during the fucking Cold War. And of course, kids with a radio can decode Soviet messages over a walkie-talkie and break into their top secret base. The good stuff is the dynamic of Steve and Robin and Dustin when he joins up with them, although I still think they undercut Steve's arc to make Robin a lesbian. And you can't really do anything about the fact that they break into a Soviet base for half the season. And of course, again, Steve has to get punished, so he gets tortured. And now we've tied Erica and Robin to the central group, so they get bigger roles and become more annoying also as we move forward. This is where we start the weird Russian obsession with Hopper and Joyce and Murray, where they're investigating these Soviets and no one notices, even though people are dying and getting shot all over the place. They're able to take a Russian prisoner around for half the season. Murray once again becomes a very critical part of the story, and they also break into the Russian base. This is where the main group, not really having anything to do, takes a pretty big step forward. They mainly just sit around and whine about Max and Eleven, and then Will whines about them whining about Max and Eleven. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin are all bitching about their girlfriends for half the season. And then Will is bitching about their girlfriends for part of the season, obviously because he's gay. And that is also established already at this point, despite what season 5 thinks. Eleven and Max spend a lot of the season being petty and mad at the boys, and they have their own little side story where they're pursuing the lead on Billy and the Mind Flayer. And of course, Nancy, with Jonathon being dragged along, is also pursuing the lead on the Mind Flayer. All of the main boys in the original crew really take a back seat this season. We sort of get like a half-ass attempt at a redemption arc for Billy, just because he had one good memory with his mom. But mainly this season, he's just the hot lifeguard and vessel of the Mind Flayer. Though all these plot lines are very bloated, very meandering, pretty uncompelling, pretty nonsensical. And the only real significant stuff that matters is Billy dying near the end of the season and Eleven losing her powers. The Russian guy they brought in dies. The show really wants to have its cake and eat it too, where it wants you to take it very seriously and think everything is intense and there's danger and stakes. But then we do things like get Dustin and his girlfriend Susie singing a never-ending story for like 5 minutes during the climax of the season. On top of all the shenanigans with them breaking into the Russian base, we get Hopper's fake-out death that they don't even give a good explanation for in season 4. We do all these really drawn-out goodbyes for Joyce, Will, Jonathon, and Eleven. And this leads to Will, Jonathon, and Mike being sidelined for all of season 4 and setting up Joyce for the absolutely retarded Russian prison plotline. All of this is completely unimpactful on a rewatch, so this is all just kind of filler, if anyone even wants to rewatch season 3 to begin with. Let's go on to season 4. I think season 4 is probably the most overrated season. I would actually call it pretty inconsiderate of people's time. It has 9 episodes that are all like an hour and 15 minutes or longer, and really doesn't do much with all that time that couldn't have been done in their standard season length of 8 episodes of about 45 minutes to an hour. The best part of the season by far is the part of the story that revolves around Eddie and Dustin. The entire arc of Eddie always running away and thinking running away is the safe and smart thing to do, repeatedly only to sacrifice himself at the end, is a really good one. Joseph Quinn really nails it. Kind of pisses me off he was wasted in Fantastic Four. The setup for them being bait, being metal music with the red lightning in the background and the whole atmosphere is kind of just overfarming, but it's pretty fucking cool. I will say, while I like the idea and at least the first part of the execution, I still don't know how much it actually did for him to die. If he'd just gone back through the rift, it seems that they would have been fine. We literally don't see a bat ever go through the rift in the entire series. And then in season 5, they vanish completely. One of my least favorite aspects of this season is that Mike, Jonathon, and Will are all completely useless. I think Eleven's story is pretty dragged out and unnecessary. They treat it like a big mystery when the entire audience has figured it out probably in 1 episode. This is another one where I think the runtime for Eleven's entire season 4 arc could have been cut down by probably about 75% and still been just as effective. We get like half a commitment to the arc of Eleven being bullied, and this is really only to set up the government pursuing her, to allow this entire flashback arc to tie Vecna into the story retroactively. It's very obvious as soon as you see Vecna that he's number 1 and Vecna. They also brought back Paul Reiser and Papa. Papa dies again, and Paul Reiser ends up chained to a pipe and then just forgotten in season 5. Really not giving these guys a ton to do here. And I just don't know how much more of the backstory we needed, other than them thinking it was a big brain plot twist. Everything with Joyce and Murray is retarded for the Russia plotline. The stuff with Hopper is not super great either, but it is at least a bit more serious. And you do get some good conversations between him and Dimitri, and he does some nice self-reflection. I really thought they should have just had Hopper flee into the Upside Down to avoid the explosion. Instead, he just goes downstairs in a room that blows up. I'm not sure if he hit dodge at the right time to get some iframes or what. And then, of course, this is compounded by the fact that somehow the Russians were able to get him out while the Americans were coming in anyway. Whatever. I guess the show also forgot that Murray was a conspiracy theorist when they brought him in, and he believes a literal Soviet Union communist with $40,000 in his pocket. They just trust him. And unsurprisingly to anyone who's ever seen a television show before, he betrays them. For our original main crew that's still in Hawkins, they really half-ass commit to this kind of tiff between Lucas and Dustin and Mike about whether or not they want to be popular. So Lucas ends up with Jason a lot, who the show hates. So all the characters have some really weird dynamics and interactions going on. And the show really hates Jason, and it makes him seem like he's evil. And it's kind of an annoying thing that it does, because it pretends like he saw the first 3 seasons of the show and that he just knows everything happening and is choosing to be a dick, when he knows nothing and just sees people that have been brutally murdered and tortured in his town. So he's really just seeking justice. But because he's kind of jock-ish, you know he's going to get treated like shit. And he gets cut in half in like half a second at the end of the season and then just never brought up again. This season to me is where the show tries to refocus with Vecna. It's pretty frustrating because the way that it's executed really fucks up the world building. It retroactively screws up all the previous seasons. And it's just one of those things where they didn't know how to add him in and account for him in a way that made sense, especially when they tie him in to everything that's happened before the show. They could have done the thing where they said, oh, he was injured or powering up or blah, blah, blah. So now he's available, which is kind of lazy, but still better than trying to patchwork the prior 3 seasons and before even season 1. But I will say Jamie Campbell Bower, who plays Vecna, gives probably the best performance of anyone in the entire series, I think. And unfortunately, a lot of it is just wasted because of the show unraveling in season 5 in particular. The things that it does well are give you a primary antagonist that you know who you're dealing with. It gives the story a much more concrete direction than the Mind Flayer did in season 3, or really the Upside Down did in season 2, because now you can direct everything at a specific person or entity, I guess. They're also able to finally utilize Max. In season 2 and 3, they kind of just attach her to the group. She doesn't have much to do beyond being Lucas's possible girlfriend and Billy's sister. And this finally gives her focus, because the way they set Vecna up in season 4, even though this kind of goes away in season 5, is that he uses the trauma of people against them and young people in particular. And because Sadie Sink actually can act, they finally give her something to do. So we get to deal with her PTSD about Billy in a bit more subtle way than we've dealt with like Will, who's having these huge panic attacks, and obviously the Mind Flayer. Mike was just kind of bummed all season 2. But we get her to be a little bit introspective. She wants to talk to her mom. She wants to write letters to leave behind for people. She's kind of depressed and seems to want to die. So this is something they actually put effort into. Of course, this is also where the massive plot armor problems come in as well, unfortunately. But there are at least bits of this that are like, oh, that's kind of a refreshing thing you did there, to have a sentient villain who has a goal, it seems like, even if we don't know what the end of that goal is. And execution just continues to be an issue in this series. Vecna loses twice to 11 in season 4. He lets Max get away here. Obviously, we see him get beat at the end by Nancy, Steve, and Jonathon. So you've got your main villain showing up, killing a couple of red shirts, and then losing like 4 fights. I think that was a really big mistake. And that doesn't even get into like the convenience of them saving Max either, where this kind of Deus Ex Machina comes out of nowhere that music can help you escape Vecna. Robin and Nancy happen to go undercover just in time, and Dustin gets a hold of them just in time, and they know the solution and have tapes on hand right at the right time. Like, it's a lot of shit lining up just to save her. And this happens multiple times this season also. I really think they should have used Vecna to kind of do some culling of the main cast. One, because it would have cut down the cast members that they're trying to follow, which obviously they're juggling way too much at this point, but they're scared to get rid of anyone. But to me, they easily could have gotten rid of Murray, Joyce, maybe Ted or Karen, Robin, and just kind of get back to the original main group. And this would also give you a lot of things you could play with as far as their character arcs and their decisions. Our main characters having to deal with these losses. It makes Vecna way scarier. And it would also give us some kind of clear power dynamic, that he's actually more powerful than them. 11 in particular, obviously. But instead, 11 kicks his ass as a kid. She kicks his ass in his own mind at the end of the season. They set his body on fire. It just really cuts your villain's knees out from under him. Besides the stupidity of the Russian plotline and what it does to the characters, it really messes up the world also. They had a mind flayer in a tank. Don't know how that happened. Demogorgons in prison that they're feeding to prisoners. They captured it, got it to Russia somehow. And this just vanishes in season 5 along with Dimitri. Of course, the ever ongoing, why wouldn't this be torturing Vecna for the entire time? And we have yet another government facility and specifically a prison that they just break into and out of. You know, we see a starved, broken-footed, exhausted Hopper fight off a Demogorgon with a spear, when we've seen them wipe out entire military units, and they'll do it again next season. Their power levels are just all over the place, and this side plot does it no favors. Another big part of the main plot, besides the stuff with Dustin and Eddie directly, is Nancy and Robin's investigation tying into all this. Steve is primarily the babysitter. They kind of take that joke from season 2 and it ramps up a bit more in season 3, and that's just who he is by season 4. And a lot of what they're dealing with for the first half of the season in particular is just hiding Eddie. I mean, the good thing for this part is all the actors have good chemistry. They're all fun together. They do seem like good friends and like they really do want to help each other and do the best for Eddie and obviously stopping Vecna. But they do manage to make them feel important, but also in the back seat for a lot of the season. And we waste like half of Mike, Will, and Jonathan's season on a road trip to Nevada, full of jokes, stopping by Susie's place. They bring their stoner friend along who sees all of this shit, the government attacking the buyer's house, Eleven and her psychic powers, and he just disappears. All of this government conflict is also never explained. Like, you don't know which agencies or factions of the government are fighting each other. You don't know who's ordering the good and bad guys. You just have kind of generic, angry military men around. And this continues right into season 5 with the military just hanging out in the Upside Down and being completely useless for the whole season. Susie is also able to hack into the super duper top secret government information and give them exact coordinates for the place Eleven is in, which is very convenient. You know, it's pretty cool that Dustin had a girlfriend for season 3 and 4. It'd be a travesty if they broke up off screen and she was just never mentioned again in season 5. So yeah, this whole season is a really mixed bag. It does have a couple of the most fun Upside Down scenes. Whether or not they make sense is its own thing entirely. Obviously, you get Steve going into the Upside Down, shirtless, bloody, barefoot, fighting the crazy bat things. Obviously, Eddie's scene was awesome, even if I don't think his sacrifice was necessary. And then, of course, as far as a world building thing, I guess the bats were only around to kill Eddie because they don't ever fly through the rift and cause problems. We don't ever see them again outside of this season. They also obviously just give up on the air and the Upside Down being bad for you, even though it made Will and Hopper both really sick. Presumably this was a we don't want to hide the actors' faces decision. And here's another one of those things where you can really tell how little is planned out for this show, and they don't have the capacity to care beyond whatever season they're working on. Is there's almost no Demogorgons down here when people were dying almost instantly before. There's obviously no giant flesh wall encompassing the area, even though we can see pretty far into the distance with all the lightning. Thanks to spending half the season with Eleven's flashbacks and Vecna taking the time to threaten everybody instead of just doing stuff, we get a lot of his backstory, and we still have no clue how he's been spending all his time. Kind of seems like he could have just kidnapped 12 kids whenever he felt like it. This is also where we get the full Nancy Rambo /Nanbo experience. She's the leader, she's the boss from this point on. She can kill military soldiers, she kills Vecna, she knows more about tactics than Hopper, who's a vet. Nancy's just awesome, she does everything. Even the guys that she dumps still want to be friends with her and still love her, despite her being kind of a dick the entire series. And of course, Steve is never allowed to have anything beyond a damn baseball bat or a spear, even when they're fighting a giant fucking kaiju. But overall, the finale has some pretty good moments. Once you start getting into execution and world building questions, it kind of takes away from them, unfortunately. But as far as character arcs, I think they work pretty well for a couple of the characters. But you can also tell this is where they start to struggle having like 20 people to juggle when they're trying to have them all involved in direct combat somehow, and that's not really necessary or everyone's skill set. And they have to try to sync all this stuff up at the same time so that they can all be useful while also not killing anyone. It is a bummer that they killed Eddie off when I'm still not convinced it was necessary or accomplished anything. He was the best part of the season with very limited screen time. The timing of all this stuff benefits Hopper and Max the most. Max doesn't even go blind, whatever. This image kind of sums up what the show feels like, where we have half our group just watching Eleven sleep because they can't do anything. But one thing I do want to point out because I know everyone likes to meme on the I don't like girl shit in season 5, but I thought it was pretty obvious and also tasteful in seasons 1 through 4, the way that they handled Will's sexuality. In season 1, Joyce has a line about the dad calling Will a queer. Season 2, there's a little thing where a girl asks him to dance and he says no until Mike is like, yeah, go ahead and do it. You should do it. Season 3, they get into their little fight about Mike and Eleven's relationship and playing D&D. And Mike says, we all know that you don't like girls. And in season 4, there's quite a bit more of him kind of just looking at Mike in a kind of longing but sad way, where he's understanding that his love is one-sided and that there's zero chance of Mike ever feeling the same way, despite what the weirdos online want to happen. I think it's done about as well as you can handle a young person struggling with that sort of thing and not beating you over the face with it, which is what makes season 5 particularly jarring to me, is the timing and just how the story grinds to a halt, and it's just super ham-fisted and takes over the whole story. And it's also very apparent the other characters knew. Like when you have Mike make the comment about the girls, Jonathon here sees the way that Will's looking at Mike and goes out of his way to try to cheer him up. There was just no need for that shit in season 5, which I think is part of what makes it Stranger Things. And if they had no commitment to like a Hawkins-sized disaster in season 5, I cannot comprehend why they chose to end season 4 in the fashion they did. We get the world splitting open. We see the Upside Down coming into our world. There's smoke everywhere. People are fleeing Hawkins. All kinds of people are dead. And then, of course, if you've seen the beginning of season 5, it starts off with, we're all good. Town's under quarantine, but you can all just live like you normally do. More just baffling decisions. I mean, season 5 should look like fucking Gears of War. Like everyone kicked out of Hawkins, military base moved in, full on military war at the gate to our world type thing. And instead, we just get needing 15-year-old kids to still deal with shit. All right, let's get into season 5. This is where most people seem to fall off the wagon. Obviously, for me, it was a lot earlier. Season 5 overall, I think you could just watch the finale and not even watch the season and be okay, which is a pretty big problem on its own. Ooh, look at that visual. That's $500 million right there, folks. Anyway, we waste so much of season 5 on interpersonal drama and just exposition and quips. Pretty much nothing gets answered to the point where I think it would be reasonable to call it offensive. I mean, the world gets completely destroyed, and instead of worrying about that, we're getting a 20-minute scene of an unproposal that's so unclear that it has to be explained by the directors that the characters actually broke up after we spent 2 seasons putting them together out of 5. And maybe I'm just a fucking idiot, but I thought, but when I watched it, I thought they were engaged and that was just like a weird thing they were doing, like cutesy. My wife thought they were still together, but just putting the proposal on hold until they were in a bit of a better space for it, not end of the world shit. And then obviously the creators came out and were like, no, they broke up. So that's how you know the quality of the writing you're getting. Also, it's hilarious that Nancy says that she wants to break up to figure things out. And in the final scene of the show, she's dropped out of college and is still trying to figure things out. Fucking progress right there. I have no idea why they say the town is under quarantine. Realistically, the entire town should have been cleared out and you should have like 10,000 soldiers there. There's an interdimensional rift that looks like a volcano coming up in the middle of the country. And yet instead they call it a quarantine and nothing about it is a quarantine, seemingly. Like Murray is a smuggler now. He's practically Han Solo. They let him run the radio station. They're going to school. Day-to-day life's normal. I don't know how there's no protests. I don't know how there's no national news. You've got a military lockdown on a city, and it doesn't seem like the rest of the country or world gives a shit at all. Hopper has done roughly 36 crawls at this point. They haven't seen the massive flesh wall until early in this crawl somehow. Obviously, we haven't seen it in the previous 4 seasons either. Demogorgons just weren't a thing also. It seems like they just think they're dead. The military is just kind of fucking around, cruising around. They don't seem to think it's dangerous. We've completely just defanged this entire aspect of the story. Like, it's really hard to go back to season 1 knowing that you can just go hang out in the Upside Down whenever you feel like, and you should be okay. If you have a town that's under a military lockdown and presumably martial law, how can they not find 11? How can they not see her big ass training course? How can they not be aware of the history of this specific area and facility and not arrest all of the main characters? Her training course is absolute fucking cringe. I don't know how many of these shows are going to do this dumb shit where the creators think that like a playground is a training course. I mean, it's okay to be simple. Like Luke training in Star Wars was being able to do a handstand and lift a bunch of rocks with Yoda on top of him. It makes perfect sense for the application of what he's trying to strengthen. And I don't know how they managed to find, it seems like every actor and actress in the world who isn't coordinated enough to run somehow. The main characters this season are just all of the girls and Will, who's gay, so half a girl maybe. But even then, calling any of them characters is kind of generous. Everyone in this season just functions like an exposition machine to just describe the plot or recap it or say what the plan is. It also became the Holly show out of nowhere, and I'm pretty sure they aged her up. I think she was supposed to be 8 or 9, and the actress is like 12, which, 2 years isn't a big deal usually, but she looks very much older. Either way, this whole Vecna mind adjacent upside down thing, I don't really understand why it matters. I mean, they make it matter in a weird way for the plot, as if he can only either be in his own mind as Henry or in his physical body in the abyss as Vecna. But like the kids are in the middle of the giant kaiju thingy and they're being tentacled. So it's not like they could escape even if they weren't in this mind abyss upside down whatever area. And this takes up probably a third of the screen time and just seems completely pointless and indirect and just, again, like they don't know what to do with people. So they just keep adding upside down equivalents. I think there's a pretty good argument that beyond backstory and exposition, Max and Holly could have not existed in this season, and you could probably still have the whole season without it with a couple very minor tweaks. And this just sort of seems like a borderline memory store thing where they didn't know how to get you the shit that's in the stage play or wherever else that's not the show. So they have this Vecna's mind area just to show you the past that they couldn't fit into season 4. So instead of either vaguely answering questions with the supernatural, tidying up some things story-wise, we're adding in more areas, more dimensions, making Holly the main character, who I bet most people didn't even remember. People like Argyle, the replacement sheriffs, all of them disappeared. How did Hopper come back to life after being in a Russian prison for a year or whatever it's been at this point? Everyone just thought he was dead and now he's suddenly back in the sheriff again. They didn't even care to give a throwaway line. It's just shit that got forgotten, which I think is just more evidence that they really needed to kind of pare the cast down, but didn't have the balls to do it because they don't want to impact any spin-off possibility, I'm guessing. I have no idea why we gave like the awkward, quirky Robin the DJ role instead of Steve, who was the charismatic popular guy literally the whole show. And then we spend time on this dumb shit like Steve and Jonathon racing up the ladder to impress Nancy like fucking monkeys. And then whenever they talk about her, it's just complete glazing about how great she is. She's even more of the boss now. Super fucking annoying to the point of being comical in the finale. Joyce has absolutely nothing to do except to cry about her boy. Murray has gone from conspiracy theorist to infiltrator to spy to smuggler now. They brought Linda Hamilton in just to have no character. She's the boss, she's the PhD. They took the time to set up a military base in the Upside Down, but they can't see a planet collision happening in the finale. One of the highlights is dipshit Derek, but he's really only useful in small amounts. He's kind of like Cleveland from Family Guy. You wouldn't want too much of him for sure. We get a lot of time with Robin and her girlfriend, who's supposed to be neurotic and kind of annoying, and she is. The rest of her characters just quips or repeating lines or talking to Will about being gay. They've really just narrowed her down to nothing this season. We get Dustin being angry about Eddie and dealing with Jason's friends. And it's primarily just to mess up the crawl for a bit and drag that out. It also feels weird because he's kind of like the chipper optimist one of the group. So even if it makes sense, it's not a decision that I really like. And you could kind of get away with having him be normal after 2 years with maybe, moments of sadness or whatever here and there, instead of this weird angry thing that they do with him for like half the season. Not a ton of fun to watch. Here's where we get more of the weird power scaling type issues. Ted gets just thrown aside, forgotten for the season until the last 5 minutes. Karen fights a Demogorgon with a wine bottle, and she holds up better than Russian prisoners and entire battle units of trained soldiers. And then she gets slashed in a way that she should die. The show doesn't want to do that, so it just kind of makes everything nonsensical once again. In the first half of the season, we really dick around a lot. This is where they take family hostage and tie them up in a barn. I guess they starve to death. But we just get a lot of bickering between Steve and Jonathon and Dustin and everyone. It really goes back to feeling like season 3, where they're just trying to fill time with drama because they don't actually know what to do with the story. And why this time wasn't used to kind of complete your character arcs and clarify any issues you had with the first 4 seasons, wrap up all the plot threads, maybe leave a dangling carrot there if you want a spin-off potential, which they do anyway. But instead, we just get a lot of nothing. Hopper and Eleven kill a ton of special forces guys, and this which has no consequence as far as the military is concerned at the end of the season. But whatever. We do all this dicking around with trying to track a Demogorgon just for Will to be able to possess them anyway, which is like a super redundancy. And I know they couldn't have known that, but I mean, come on, you've got 9 hours that you're using. Don't just repeat storylines and have them overlap like that. My God. This entire thing with Max is really frustrating to watch because all they use it for is to bait that Henry has some tragic memory he can't get into or doesn't want to get into. And they bait it repeatedly. And then when they finally get to it, they have Henry cry and then be like, no, I chose this. So it's not even a memory he should be upset about. Really weird directing in that scene. Just bizarre how they chose to spend time this season. Here we see Vecna's only win when he raids the military base, takes the kids. No clue why he waited so long to do this. Doesn't seem like he needed to. No clue why he doesn't just kill Will here because it doesn't seem like he needs him anymore. But they wanted their cliffhanger, so that's what they did. We also bring back Kali, who I don't think anyone remembers, but they needed someone they could use as a plot device and then kill at the end of the season. I thought it was good that they gave Will powers. He hadn't really been useful at all, other than just rubbing his neck with goosebumps. It is kind of weird that they tied this all into his gayness and his comfort with it, especially like I mentioned, where it seems like everyone already knew, and then they don't bother with his big annoying ass coming out I don't like girls thing until episode 7. I mean, it would have been annoying regardless of where they put it, but at least if you put it in like episode 2, then when his powers awaken, you're like, okay, that part's already done. And again, as soon as Vecna sees he has powers, I don't know why he doesn't just kill him, because he literally just floats him over to him and talks. Don't know why they didn't kill Lucas. He gets clawed and then he's just good to go in episode 5. And this is another one of those things where the timing is crazy, that he awakens his powers exactly in time to save Lucas, Robin, Mike, his mom. Like, everyone was just about to die and now they're good. No one got taken out quickly in this Demogorgon raid of a military base. The way that they released these, the next batch being episodes 5, 6, and 7, really just felt like they wanted to drag it out, because the middle 3 episodes are pretty much just conjecture about the abyss and Vecna's mind and where they're all located in the upside down wormhole. And of course, all of this is just correct. We also see Kali find all these pregnant women from Eleven's blood and Kali's blood. And I guess they just blow them all up when the show ends because they never get even discussed again. So fuck them. No pro-lifers here. Nancy shoots this energy shield thing that we don't even find out what it is. It just creates the jizz room, and then they blow it up later with a Prince song to blow up the whole upside down wormhole and disconnect from the abyss. I already mentioned the super confusing non-breakup breakup because Nancy needed to be independent and Jonathon needed to be a communist. And we spend all this damn time in this cave memory just to bait it, and find out it's the Mind Flayer, which we already knew. I mean, you can either Google the Wikipedia or just know that he got his powers from somewhere. No clue why Vecna felt the need to use Will to attack the hospital looking for Max, who's in a coma, as if he doesn't know where people in comas go, or couldn't just raid the whole town anyway. And then we get great scenes like this where Lucas kicks a demo dog, no problem. They just straight up rip off the cafeteria scene from Jurassic Park. Karen hobbled, somehow sped ahead of all of them and the kids, and rigged a dryer to blow up, and all the perfect timing in the world. Even when Max goes to escape, she's been in a coma for like 2 years, and she takes like 10 minutes to say bye to Holly. But it's also funny that she's just like, see ya, sucker, you're on your own. But she really should have just been like, Holly, go here. I have to go. It's been too long. And then just be on the way. At this point, I actually thought Ted might just be dead and they forgot, like how they forgot about Argyle and the cops. But no, they just don't give a shit about him. And then episode 7, your second to last episode, is just the nothing happens except exposition and theories crafting. There's not even that much to talk about, even including the cringe I don't like girls shit. And of course, Kali is 2 for 2 on showing up and being a bad influence. Tells 11 she should kill herself. Ugh. No build up, no arc, no reasoning, just, oh, okay. Obviously, this is the part that gets memed, but this really just encapsulates the much bigger problem with this show, which is everything is so overdramatic. The 5th season in particular seems very motivated by meta things like social commentary and ideology. Nothing is happening. We spend 15 fucking minutes on this. The show grinds to a halt. I mean, this scene really isn't any worse than the unproposal scene, except for the fact that, I mean, Will's probably a worse actor than Nancy and Jonathon, but both of them are just awful, awful scenes. And we have scenes like this in every single episode. Even the finale, when you wrap up with the kaiju fight with an hour left, it's just all this really self-indulgent, rambling drama and people crying. I don't know if I've ever seen so many people cry in a damn show before. Like in the next episode, this scene doesn't get shit on as much, but they're about to have planets colliding and the scene is stopping so that Mike can apologize to Will for not recognizing his gayness, even though he had already recognized it years prior. And this is like the justification for the whole Vecna's mind thing for the entire season. It's just like this one little extra bump in drama that's not even really dramatic. I mean, it's like 10 minutes into a 2-hour finale. Steve's not going to die like this. They baited every season, but they had to have some way to justify stopping the planets colliding right where they needed them to. And luckily it worked. Like 5 feet away. Didn't crush them and they can reach it. I also am not clear why they didn't give this saving Steve to Dustin and they gave it to Jonathon instead. Dustin blames himself for Eddie's death, even though I don't, and probably most people don't. It would have been a nice little touch there for redemption in his own eyes, but whatever. It's all very unclear to me why Vecna needs the kids in his mind. I still don't fucking get it. Even here, when he literally just disappears, he's back in the abyss with the kids, and the kaiju mind flayer wakes up. So, not sure what you're doing there, but whatever. I hate every scene with Steve and Jonathon. They just talk about how great Nancy is, even though she's dumped both of them. And she's independent and she's too strong for them. Blah, blah, blah. Fuck off. And like I said, this is all funny because it just leads to her being a college dropout, not knowing what she wants, and being friends with 2 guys that she's dumped. Whatever. This scene also makes the finale weird, where they tell each other flat out they don't like each other. There's just kind of a mutual respect. But then they all cry on the rooftop together and say they'll see each other once a month when it's really inconvenient. Can't be bothered to remember anything. These writers have the memory retention of like an infant, like where you play peekaboo with an infant and they're surprised every time. I feel like that's how the writers are after every scene. Vecna finally uses his powers in a cool way, where he fucks with Hopper, and it's like a double layered thing, which is nice too. One, he makes Hopper think he's there to shoot at him, and then he makes Hopper think that he wasn't there and that he shot 11. So then Hopper busts open 11's tank. I wish we had seen more stuff like that, especially if we're going to have Kali here and the psychic people are going to have illusion abilities. They should kind of have some fun with it, but they mostly just have him break people's bones and be kind of gross. They have Hopper take out an entire special forces unit. And Murray blows up a helicopter with C4. I guess they just have no respect for the military at all in this show. I'm including the Russian military in that. It's the same shit in season 3, same shit in season 4 in the Russia part to some degree. And then 11 recaps the entire show for us. It's such an uninspired speech because she doesn't even tie it to morality. There's no build up for this decision she's trying to make. She just summarizes the show and then says, I'm going to kill myself, lol. Okay. And Henry is just acting his ass off here. We finally see the cave memory after he gets fucked up by Holly, which, again, why is he getting his ass kicked in every single scene? I mean, it just makes him seem like a bitch at some point. Maybe he hangs out with Pennywise or something. And this scene is really confused and it's really frustrating because he's crying the whole time and upset by this memory. Will's responding like, oh, it's not your fault type thing. And the way that he's acting, that's what Will should be saying. But then Vecna is like crying and sad, but also like, no, I chose this. Just have his emotions be unclear and maybe kind of confused, like it was a blocked memory or something. And then let him smile at the end. Like that's the moment he got his powers. That's who he became, Vecna. Huzzah. And then you can let Will tell him to, knock it off or they'll kill him. I mean, fucking let him go at it. So much damn crying in this show. But this dude acts his ass off. I mean, he's putting in work for fucking everybody. So I can't blame him for the direction. I just don't like the choice there. Pretty cool shot here. You can at least see where some of the money went. But again, I have no clue about 11's powers. Like she kind of seemed to struggle to jump over the fence at the military base. And now she's jumping up stones through a wormhole in like 5 seconds and throwing fucking giant boulders the size of this kaiju's head. I don't know what's going on. It's a CGI fest all over the screen. And this fight is really stupid. They made the kaiju just massive. They've got Steve and Dustin running under it when even stepping near this thing, it seems like it might just crush them by accident. You've got Lucas using his slingshot to throw oil. Mike's got a flare gun because his sister refused to give him one of her 20 guns. as if she had 20 hands. She's the bait. They also teleport from this flat plane up onto the top of the mountains. And this whole thing just seems really thrown together, pretty poorly edited. They're also setting this fucking thing on fire with the kids inside. They don't know how much they're shaking around in there. And the fight only lasts like 5 minutes. So you've built up to this fucking mind flayer kaiju fight for 40 episodes and it's done in 5 minutes. I mean, they must have taken advice from the Game of Thrones season 8 people. I'm pretty sure we spent more time on the unproposal. And I think we probably spent more time on the I don't like girls scenes than this fucking fight. Just crazy. And then we get our first F-bomb of the series. That's an appropriate use of it. I'll give it that at least. But I don't know where Joyce came from. She damn sure didn't outrun that kaiju. She must have just teleported away and teleported back. I guess it's abyss physics or something, I don't know. And we get a montage of everybody that Vecna has killed or hurt as she's just hacking away at him. It reminds me of Theon's beheading in Game of Thrones. This was a bit of like a Family Guy joke though, because they thought Vecna was dead, the kaiju was down. They all come in, they're freeing the kids, and then he's like burbling blood for like 20 seconds before she finally goes and decapitates him. And that goes on for like 30 seconds. It kind of would have been funny if after the montage of Will in the first couple of seasons, he'd have been like, Joyce, I wasn't even an idea yet. Oh my God. But it's finally done, and there is almost an hour left of this show. One last thing I want to talk about is just the misuse of the military this entire season. They seemingly forgot about the Demogorgons. I know that those dumbass brothers came out and said, oh, well, they would attack, but this is their planet. This is their world. Could you imagine going to Earth and seeing a very high up politician or whatever, and there just being 0 people around? What this really should have been to me was some kind of situation where he had an army of Demogorgons there. Maybe you have Will take control of a certain amount, but it's not enough. And then the military, because they finally figured out what the kids were doing, comes in, and then you have their firepower to help fight this giant fucking kaiju and Demogorgons, and you can let the kids deal with Vecna in whatever way you see fit, instead of just this very big, empty, flat, simplistic fight. I mean, you built up to this fight for 5 seasons and put no creativity into the environment. We have a moving Mortal Kombat level in the chest of a kaiju. And I'm kind of surprised they wouldn't want that shot of just a massive Demogorgons running at the kids, fucking tanks and helicopters and soldiers rolling through behind the kids, and the giant collision and explosions and spectacle. You could let your composer go crazy with the music. Even having the demo dogs and Demogorgons and bats, all that stuff just really adds to the chaos and the scale. Even if you just want to have Will and Vecna fighting for control of the hive. So you're getting these creatures fighting each other and being controlled. And you can see Vecna and Will taking damage, and then your little group breaks through to get to Vecna. I mean, however you want to do it, but there's limitless possibilities here. I think even without the giant kaiju, you could still just had Vecna as kind of your general with all of his foot soldiers. And it might have also been smart to have a throwaway line if you're going to do that, or even just for the kaiju Vecna team up, honestly, to be like, oh, we can disconnect the hive here. We don't have to run it through the wormhole to control all of our soldiers or whatever bullshit. I mean, it's your made up species. You can do whatever you want, which they have been very clearly doing. And there's some decent shots in here, but it just feels really small scale after all that build up. You got season 4 ending with the world splitting. I mean, you've got the fucking budget. Go all out. There's so many of these things that I feel like are just simple questions that I'm like, did no one ask this? Like, I'm guessing dozens to hundreds of people worked on this, and not a single person was like, hey, why don't we do something with the military besides have them be fucking retarded? And also, why don't we have more people in this giant, flat, empty wasteland than the kaiju and Vecna? And there's also a bit of weird directing here, too, when they get out. They have Hopper be like very stoic when finding out that Eleven is with them on her return. Like, he just kind of does a deep breath. And Dustin and Hopper both sound very casual when they come out. This is one of the times to me that you would want Dustin to come out being excited. Maybe Hopper's a little bit panicked and some kind of like, not huge crying and breakdown, but something. I mean, he does a deep breath. It's not his bad acting. I just wish they'd done a little bit more there. They have the whole cast crying the whole fucking finale. We can't get Hopper to show a little bit more relief. When they get back to the gate, very unsurprisingly, the government is just waiting. And Eleven stays behind. She talks to Mike in her mind. I've seen a lot of people debating all this shit. I think she lived. At the end of the day, they want to do a spinoff 10 years from now. They'll just say she lived, and they'll call it The Strangest Things, and it'll be in the 90s. But then this goes on forever also, because they blow up the shield generator thing that cuts off the wormhole because Dustin's intuitions are just correct. I actually didn't notice in my first watch through, but 11 says I love you, and Mike only says it in one of the flashbacks. He doesn't even say it as he thinks she's dying. But the reason that I think that she lived is because for her to talk in Mike's mind with him, she would have to overcome the speaker things, which is the implication of how he figured out what she was trying to tell him. So I guess Kali was nice enough to die really slowly and use her powers until she blew up first. I just don't care. I think they left it ambiguous and they fucked up enough stuff in this show. Either one could be correct. It's a funny pause screen. She looks like fucking Pennywise. After that whole scene that goes on forever because they use Purple Rain, the military, who they've killed many members of, who did nothing, who didn't see a planet crashing down on their base, who couldn't stop their base from being infiltrated, who couldn't implement the quarantine, who lost 12 children they took by force, they just disappear. Never mentioned again. Fuck it. We see Max is finally recovered. Lucas is graduating. Little time jump there. They have like zero chemistry. It's actually unbelievable because I think they're both pretty decent actors. And also, I don't know why they have her just demean him on graduation day. Like, it's okay to have some sincere moments, whatever. We get a pretty nice moment here from Mike and Hopper, some good performances, where Mike doesn't want to close the book on this chapter of his life. And Hopper says, you know, you can be depressed and never move on and kind of end up like me, is the implication. Or you can keep moving forward. And which one do you think Elle would want? And, you know, blah, blah, blah. You still got a lot of your life ahead of you. So he goes to his graduation late. Dustin's a valedictorian, gives a pretty amusing speech where he talks about how rough it was, but then kind of says, fuck the system as he's going off to college to become part of the system. Whatever. It's funny enough. All of this could be shorter, though, to be clear. The girl that rejected Dustin in season 2 at the dance invites him to a party. He wants to go. Not sure if they forgot about Susie or just he dumped her off screen. I mean, they forgot a lot about, they forgot a lot of shit. They forgot Max's mom didn't visit Max in the hospital. What the fuck are you going to do? You know, why rewatch your own show or keep track of characters or anything? But they decided to go play D&D instead. To me, it just kind of feels undeserved and kind of like bullshit. These four, like Steve and Jonathon already said they don't like each other. Nancy has dumped both of them, arguably cheated on Steve. Robin has rejected Steve. They all think they're too good for Hawkins, except for Steve. And yet they promise to meet up once a month at a place that isn't convenient for any of them for the rest of their lives. I get what they're going for the whole 80s thing, but they just didn't really have that kind of dynamic. Jonathon was Nancy's bitch for 4 years. Steve was kind of the babysitter, and him and Robin had chemistry, but they were never like the team of four that you think of when you think of the show. We do get nice closure for Hopper and Joyce. He proposes and they're going to move to Montauk to be closer to the kids. And apparently that's a place that's associated with conspiracy shit in real life or aliens or whatever. So appropriate for the show. And we get some more crying as the kids play D&D and they ask Mike to talk about where each character is going to end up. And this is also part of why I think 11 is alive, because the way that this is shown is just shown as the way that they're currently living their lives. It's not like a speculative fantasy type thing or like way down the road. It looks like he's kind of just narrating their lives in the context of a story. And it looks like 11 went off to the Three Waterfalls place. I'm guessing Iceland or something. Maybe Greenland. I don't fucking know. Either way, happy endings all around. Nice and wrapped up story. I guess Wills is happy. He just ends up at a gay bar. I mean, kind of unambitious, but whatever. And they all put their books away. We see Holly and Dustin and the younger kids coming into play. And it's really hard to believe there won't be a spinoff fairly soon. And that's Stranger Things. I just thought it was super disappointing. And I'm sure many people will have an initial knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it was so good. And the emotions worked on me and blah, blah, blah. But this is just another one that I think in a month or two won't be talked about beyond the scope of the most watched thing until something else gets more watched, which to be fair might not happen for a while. As these streaming services accumulate more and more shit on there, it's hard to get everyone on board for one show. But I just don't think that people are going to give a fuck about this show, even if they say they like it. I guess we'll see. All right, well, that was Stranger Things. Overall, it's a fun enough series. I don't hate it. I don't think it's offensive. I just think it's overrated. I think it could have been so much better if they had just made some pretty basic decisions and had a little bit of balls. But the Duffer Brothers are the ones getting the big fat ass contract from Paramount. So maybe they were smart to just play it safe and dumb for 5 seasons and just keep nostalgia baiting. Personally, I'll probably never watch it again. Maybe season 1. But I'm kind of glad that it's done, honestly, just because I don't think they could do much more with it. They let all the kids get much older, obviously. They didn't seem to know what to do with the world, what to do with the characters. You could argue they did massive damage to all of them at different points. You know, Hopper being borderline abusive dad, keeping 11 prisoner, lying to Mike and trying to get them to break up, all really controlling, inappropriate behavior. Just one example. You know, Joyce seemingly not giving a fuck about Jonathon while just being like, my boy, about Will over and over. There's a lot of weird shit in here if you think about it too much. But yeah, I think this is probably one of the last cultural media moments for a while as far as a long running show. You know, you're going to get things like Barbie and K-pop Demon Hunters. If you want to throw a superhero movie in there, maybe Doomsday or some shit, who knows. But as far as just a culturally relevant show for a few years, this might be it for a while. And let's face it, if Netflix does buy Warner Brothers, it'll be a miracle if we even get a decent second season of another show. So I'm going to leave it here for this one. If you've made it through this whole video, let me know what you think. I really didn't intend for it to be this long, but it is what it is. I am talking about a whole series, even if it was a bit low resolution. Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.